Some creature is using my wife's skin. I've never been happier. I came home one night at 7 p.m. I had a longer shift than normal due to multiple people calling out our project deadline coming sooner than expected. I had been doing that for the past 2 weeks. It had been stressing me, I was more irritable, and the smallest things set me off. It wasn't enjoyable and I couldn't wait to get a break once that project was done. Take 3 PTO days, kick back and relax by watching movies. I've been coming home and eating takeout every day. I walked into the house that night like normal and smelled cooking. It was the best thing to hit my nose all week. As soon as I turn into the kitchen, I see my wife. "Hello, honey. How was work today? Let me take your jacket and get you a plate," she said with the brightest smile. I don't know if I was too tired to question it, but that was all it took to calm me down after my stressful day back then. I kissed her, let her take my jacket, and enjoyed a home-cooked dinner for the first time in a while. Later that evening, I talked about my day and the project soon after relaxing by watching TV with her. I got in the shower around 10 p.m. It was a good night, but it was off to another stressful day at work the next day. That's what I thought anyway. The door to my bedroom was cracked open. I didn't even question it. When I walked in, my wife was right there in bed. A full nightgown, hair was undone, just looking amazing and ready for action. I couldn't help myself. Her skin was healthier than ever, her eyes sparkling, the hair smooth with a shine. Her body was in better shape than I have ever noticed, and something about those lips was drawing me in. Long story short, I was experiencing more love than I have had in a long while. I'm only 25 and I used to just give up after her saying she wasn't in the mood all the time. They say that intimacy is best enjoyed while you're young, and I'm not getting any younger. Best night of my life until reality hit. Just a week ago at the time, I had an episode of rage and took it all out on her. Her mood hadn't been the best either and we've been fighting. I had killed her and buried her in the backyard. My wife was supposed to be dead. "Breakfast time, hun," she calls out to me. I get out of bed to meet her in the kitchen. That same shining smile instead of sparkling eyes greeted me. Nothing in that body of hers is human. Something is using it. But you know what? I've never been happier. It's been 2 years since then. We have a kid on the way. My 38M, stay-at-home wife, 40F, has been treating our son, 12M, poorly and favoring our daughter, 9F, ever since I complimented his cooking. How should I handle this? My wife has always been the one to cook around the house, and as an Italian, it's one of the reasons I fell so hard for her. I've offered to help out in the kitchen or even cook for her sometimes, but she's always firmly, yet politely, told me no, and I can't really blame her because I did not get either of my parents' good cooking genes. Because of this, I've always been sure to thank her for every meal, and I've taught my children to do the same. For the past year or so, my son has been watching a ton of cooking videos on YouTube and TikTok, and he's really been wanting to try his hand at cooking. My wife was happy to teach him, and at least twice a week, the two of them will go out to the store, buy ingredients for a meal he found on TikTok, and come home and make it. It's been awesome seeing them bonding more since they haven't really had much overlap in interests before this. About a month ago after dinner, my son asked his mom if he could try making us all a meal on his own. I said it sounded like a great idea, and she hemmed and hawed for a little while before agreeing. So that Saturday, she took him to the store to get his ingredients, and then he got to work. She supervised here and there, but he insisted that she didn't need to, so eventually she came to the living room and sat with my daughter and I, looking a little bit dejected, so I reassured her that I was sure he'll still want to cook with her. He just wanted to try it out on his own. That seemed to help out a little, but she still seemed a little off. When he finished and we all sat down to eat, I was honestly surprised at just how good he managed to do on his own. I feel bad saying it, but even after a year or so of cooking with his mother, I expected him to mess up more than he did. I wanted to encourage this interest of his, so I was sure to let him know while I was eating how good he did, and gently bring up the few mistakes he had made. I did it a lot more than I usually would with my wife's cooking, and in hindsight I can see that that's what started all of this. His sister, being his little sister, was not as supportive as I was and quite rudely insulted his cooking. I was going to tell her to mind her manners and be thankful that he cooked for us when my wife made a sound and pushed her plate away, before agreeing and saying that it was too salty and overcooked. This took me aback, and I could tell my son took it hard too, as his mood visibly dropped. I didn't say anything at the time since my wife and I never argue in front of the kids, and I just kept up the praise of my son's cooking as his mother picked at the plate for a little while longer before she took her and our daughter's plates to the kitchen. A little while later, I had went to check on my son, and I could tell that he had been crying, so I comforted him, told him I was sure his mother loved the food and that she was probably just having a bad day, not to take it personally. Then later, once the kids were asleep, I confronted her about it, and she tried to just brush it off, but I pushed, and she got mad and said that I complimented his cooking far more than I ever complimented hers. This caught me off guard since I didn't expect my wife to be jealous of our son. and I unfortunately let out an involuntary scoff at this. She blew up at me for laughing, and we ended up arguing for a while before eventually I managed to explain that I was complimenting him so much because I wanted to encourage him to keep cooking, and she even admitted that she shouldn't have been so harsh about it. She said she would apologize to him, and I figured that everything was settled. That Monday, when I was driving my son to school, I noticed he wasn't acting normal and looking out the window, trying to hide his face from me. I asked him what was wrong, and he told me he was fine, but I could tell he was fighting back tears, so I asked him again, and he broke and told me that after I had left to get the car started, she told him that she was going to be cooking alone again from now on. I was furious about this, but kept my cool and told him I would talk to her about it, bought him a snack from the store before dropping him off at school. I left work early so I could get home before the kids and talk to my wife. I'll admit I didn't handle it as well as I could have, and we ended up in a shouting match where I was calling her childish for being so vindictive towards our son because she was upset with me. And she called him a baby and said he shouldn't be so sad about not being allowed to cook since it wasn't a man's job to do so anyway. We ended up leaving each other alone to cool down, and when our kids got home, my wife took our daughter out and came back later with a load of toys and clothes for her. I knew immediately what she was trying to do, and that night I told her that I would not let her use the money I make for our family to punish my son. She couldn't take this well, and we ended up arguing again. I slept in the guest room and have been up to this point. For this past month, my wife has kept up this vindictive showering of our daughter with attention and gifts while almost entirely ignoring my son. I've been talking to my parents and brother about this, and while they agree that she's wrong, they also don't see it as that big a problem and think it'll sort itself out. At this point, with how she's been treating our son, I'm starting to fall out of love with her, but I also don't want to just jump to divorce if there's something that I can do to fix this whole situation. I can honestly say that we've never had a fight this big. Sure, we bicker every now and then, but she's never taken that out on my son in the past. I feel responsible and guilty about what happened, and I've been trying to do nice things for my son when I can, but I also don't want to mirror my wife's behavior, so I've also been taking my daughter with us about half the time we go places. But whenever we do, she's been very rude and always talks about all the stuff her mother does for her lately, because she knows it bothers her brother. Seeing the way my wife has been treating our son has made me second-guess our marriage, but I don't want to just jump straight to divorce either. Any advice on what I should do or how to best bring up the topic of therapy would be appreciated.